Welcome. I'm so glad to be back with you. Every story you're about to hear is real, terrifying, and sent in by listeners just like you. So, turn off the lights, wrap yourself in a blanket, grab some snacks. You're in for a night of true horror. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It truly helps and inspires us to bring you even more chilling tales. Are you ready? Then settle in, because it's time for the long-awaited scary stories for a rainy evening. They always warned us about Black Hollow. They said it swallows those who dare to enter and spits out only their screams. But I never believed the stories until the night we crossed the old iron bridge. Annalise Weber had never been the type to believe in ghost stories. At 26, she considered herself a rational woman, grounded in facts, not fairy tales. But when she received the invitation from her childhood friend, Victor Schaefer, something tugged at her instincts. The letter was old-fashioned, written with ink on yellowed paper, and carried the distinct scent of damp earth. "Come to Black Hollow," it said. "There's something you need to see. Something that has been waiting for us all these years." She almost laughed when she read it. Almost. Until she realized Victor had disappeared 5 years ago. The road to Black Hollow was barely a road at all, twisting, broken, and lined with trees that leaned too close, as if whispering secrets. Annalise drove in silence, the only sound the crunch of gravel under her tires. At the edge of the forest stood the old iron bridge, rusted and groaning in the wind. As she crossed it, a shadow darted across the corner of her vision. She turned, but there was nothing. Only mist curling over the hollow beyond, thick and heavy like wet cotton. Her phone buzzed weakly. No signal. "Perfect," she muttered, stepping out into the fog. The house stood like a skeleton, half swallowed by vines. Its windows were broken, the door swinging slowly on its hinges. Inside, the air was musty and cold. Old portraits lined the hallway. Men and women with blurred faces, their eyes blackened by time. "Victor," Annalise called out, her voice swallowed by the silence. A faint sound answered, a dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. She hesitated but moved forward, deeper into the house, deeper into Black Hollow's secrets. In the parlor, she found it, a cracked mirror, taller than a man. Its frame was ornate, wrapped in carvings of writhing figures. As she approached, the air grew colder. Her reflection shimmered, then changed. Instead of herself, she saw a younger version, maybe 15 years old, standing barefoot in the woods, crying. Behind her, a dark figure loomed, featureless, hollow. "Annalise," a voice whispered from the mirror. She stumbled back, heart pounding, but the image remained, frozen, waiting. Annalise backed away from the mirror, her breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. The whisper echoed in her mind, still faint but growing louder. "Annalise." She turned, her pulse racing. The room around her seemed darker now, as though the walls themselves were closing in. The air felt thick, pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. There was something wrong with the house, something wrong with this place. She had felt it when she crossed the bridge, and now it was here with her, in the very bones of the house. But the shadows were moving. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a figure standing in the hallway, tall, impossibly tall, and dressed in tattered clothing. Its face was a void, a blackened space where eyes should be. Slowly it turned toward her, its head jerking unnaturally. "No," Annalise whispered, stepping backward. Her foot hit something soft, a pile of old, decaying books scattered across the floor. The figure took a step forward, then another. "Annalise!" The voice came again, closer this time, as if it was right behind her. Annalise spun around, her heart hammering in her chest. She ran, not caring where, just away from that horrible presence. The house seemed to stretch endlessly, hallways twisting like a labyrinth, doors that opened to nothing, windows that didn't lead anywhere but the dark. She found herself back in the parlor, gasping for air. The mirror was still there, but it had changed, no longer reflecting her. It was showing a vision of Victor. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "It's too late," Victor's voice came through the reflection, muffled but clear. "The hollow. It has already claimed me. It will claim you too." Annalise's hand trembled as she reached for the mirror, but before she could touch it, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candlelight. She was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, the floor beneath her feet gave way. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the void. Her body fell, falling through an endless, suffocating blackness. When Annalise opened her eyes again, she found herself lying on cold stone, the dampness seeping into her clothes. The air was thick, heavy, and smelled of earth and decay. She slowly pushed herself up, her head spinning. Where was she? The walls around her were covered in ancient, faded runes, strange symbols that she had never seen before, but somehow they felt familiar. An unsettling realization crept over her. She was in the depths of Black Hollow, the heart of the darkness that had claimed so many before her. And she wasn't alone. From the shadows, figures emerged, their faces obscured by a veil of mist. Each one seemed like a reflection of her deepest fears. A man she had once known, but whose face had become twisted and contorted. A child she had lost years ago, her body frozen in an agonized scream. A shadowy figure with hands outstretched, beckoning her forward. "You can't escape," they whispered in unison, their voices blending together, becoming one. "You're already here." Annalise tried to move, but her legs felt like lead. The darkness seemed to close in around her, pressing her down. "No," she screamed, but the words were lost in the overwhelming silence. The walls seemed to pulse, the runes glowing faintly, and the figures drew closer, their faces shifting and changing with each passing second. Her own face appeared, twisted into an expression of fear and anguish. As the figures reached out to her, Annalise fell to her knees, her hands trembling. The mirror from the house materialized before her, its surface reflecting the twisted versions of herself. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. "You will join us," they said. "You will never leave Black Hollow. You are part of us now." Tears streamed down Annalise's face as she reached toward the mirror, her hand trembling. For a moment, she saw her reflection. No longer the strong, rational woman she had once been, but a broken soul consumed by fear. Her fingers brushed the surface of the mirror, and suddenly, she was pulled into it. The cold, the darkness, and the whispers became all-consuming. She was surrounded by 1,000 versions of herself, all trapped in the endless void. And then she understood. The mirror was not just a reflection of fear. It was the prison of Black Hollow, a place where the lost souls were forever trapped, their fears manifesting over and over again. And now Annalise was one of them. As the final echo of her scream faded, Annalise felt herself slipping away, merging with the darkness. Her thoughts began to fade, her sense of self dissolving. But in the back of her mind, she heard a faint whisper, Victor's voice, weak but clear. "It's not too late." For a moment, she felt a flicker of hope. Could she escape? Could she free herself from the curse of Black Hollow? But the darkness wrapped around her, pulling her deeper into the void. The mirror's cold surface pressed against her, and she realized it was no longer her own reflection staring back. It was the reflection of someone new, someone who would join the others. You think you're safe, but Black Hollow doesn't let go that easily. It waits for those who dare to enter, and when it calls, it takes. forever. Feeling scared yet? I hope you didn't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us create even more chilling stories just for you. If you're ready, then let's continue. Get ready. The scariest part is still ahead. The evening was settling over a small town in southern Germany. In the house on the hill, which stood alone amidst the dark forests, lived two sisters, Irene and Louisa Westerhoff. Their house was old, withering, hidden from the eyes of strangers. Every window was framed with deep cracks, and the doors creaked as though the very walls of the old house were alive. However, for the sisters, this house was the home of their childhood, and despite its oddities, it held a comfort they were used to. But one day when Irene came home after a long day in town, she noticed something strange. When she entered the house, Louisa didn't greet her at the door as usual. The house was strangely quiet. "Louisa?" Irene called out, but the only answer was the echo. She went through all the rooms, but her sister was nowhere to be found. Only one room remained locked. It was the room the sisters never opened. The room Irene had almost forgotten about. But something made her try. She stood in front of the door, which was locked, and felt her heart beat faster. Suddenly, as if by some unseen force, the door opened. Irene entered and found her sister standing in front of an ancient portrait in the corner of the room. The portrait depicted a woman in an old dress, her eyes dark and empty, as if she were gazing through time. Her face was expressive yet unnatural, and her gaze was filled with fear and terror. "Louisa, what are you doing here?" Irene asked as she approached. But Louisa didn't respond. She stood motionless, as if in a trance, her eyes fixed on the painting. "Louisa," Irene called again, shaking her sister. Then Louisa finally turned, her face pale as chalk, her expression eerily vacant. "Irene, I saw her. She was alive. I heard her whispering, telling me to look into her eyes, and she said I needed to be ready. I must return." Irene frowned and looked at the painting. For some reason, she began to feel strange sensations, a coldness and unease that grew stronger. But she couldn't understand what was happening to Louisa. That night, Irene couldn't sleep. Lying in her bed, she thought about what had happened with Louisa. Could this painting really possess some sort of power? And how was it connected to the strange events in the house? Suddenly, she heard a rustling in the corridor. Irene jumped out of bed and cautiously approached the door. The rustling stopped. However, by some strange intuition, she felt that something was wrong. She slowly made her way to the room where the portrait hung. The door was ajar, and she peered inside. Louisa was standing in front of the painting. Her hands were raised as if in a trance, and she was whispering words in a language Irene didn't understand. "Louisa, what are you doing?" Irene asked, but Louisa didn't respond. Then Irene noticed. The eyes in the portrait began to move, following Louisa. It was impossible. How? Why? Whoa. "Louisa, stop. You don't understand what you're doing," Irene screamed, grabbing her sister by the shoulders and shaking her. At that moment, something unimaginable happened. The eyes in the portrait began to pierce Irene, and a voice in her sister's head, deep and terrifying, spoke the words, "You should not interfere." The next morning, Irene decided to investigate what really lay behind this portrait. She found an old book that mentioned an ancient legend about the painting. It said that this painting was cursed, and anyone who gazed into the eyes of the woman depicted on it became her prisoner. These people began to see the world through her eyes and obey her will. Furthermore, they became part of the painting, but not immediately. Their physical bodies remained, but their souls were trapped inside the painting forever. Irene shuddered as a cold sweat ran down her back. Louisa was in danger. Irene decided that she must destroy the painting to save her sister. She went up to the old attic where, according to legend, a fragile artifact capable of breaking any curse was stored. But as soon as she took it in her hands, the old walls began to crack, and the floor beneath her feet started to break apart. She hurried back to the painting, but when she tried to tear it from the wall, something invisible held it in place. The forces were unequal. Irene felt the cold seeping into her soul, and dark silhouettes began to surround her. It had never been so terrifying as it was in this moment. The painting started to come to life, its eyes glowing with an ominous light, and shadows broke free from it, filling the room. "You won't escape, Irene," whispered Louisa, in a voice that was no longer hers. Irene realized that the only way to break the curse was to sacrifice herself. She screamed and threw the artifact at the canvas. At that moment, the eyes on the painting flared with bright light, and everything around them was consumed by darkness. When the light faded and Irene opened her eyes, she was no longer in the room. She was standing in front of the painting, and her eyes were now in the painting. There was nothing left of her body, only dark forces, and Louisa stood beside her, now one of the many souls trapped within the portrait. Irene understood that now she too was part of this world, and her sister would likely remain here forever, in this eerie, eternal reflection. Still with us, or too scared to stay? If you haven't yet, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It keeps the darkness whispering new tales your way. Now, if you're brave enough, let's dive even deeper. The true horror is just beginning. It was a cold autumn evening when Valerie received the letter. She had been living in Berlin for years, far from her roots, far from the place that used to haunt her dreams. The letter came in a thick, yellowed envelope, sealed with deep crimson wax. It had no return address. Only the words were scrawled across the front. "Come home, Valerie. Blackthorn Manor awaits you." She hadn't heard from her family in years. Her last visit to the small estate, nestled deep in the English countryside, had been years ago, on the eve of her parents' mysterious deaths. The fire that consumed Blackthorn Manor, leaving it a shell of ashes, had taken everything: her family, her memories, and the quiet life she once knew. But now this strange letter. The curiosity gnawed at her. Without a second thought, she packed her bags and boarded a flight to England. The journey to Blackthorn Manor took longer than she expected. The roads wound through thick, damp forests, the trees so densely packed it felt as though the world had disappeared outside the car windows. The sky was heavy with clouds. A faint mist clung to the earth, and an eerie silence seemed to press in around her. As Valerie drove deeper into the countryside, a cold chill began to creep over her. The familiar landscape of rolling hills was gone, replaced with twisted branches and overgrown underbrush. Finally, after what felt like hours of endless driving, she saw it. Blackthorn Manor. The mansion loomed before her like a dark sentinel, its silhouette a jagged shadow against the stormy sky. The fire had spared little, but the structure still stood, albeit sagging and weathered. The once grand stonework was now cracked, and the iron gates creaked in the wind. The grounds were overrun with ivy, the gardens abandoned to wild growth. Valerie stepped out of the car, her breath misting in the air. The silence was suffocating. No birds, no sounds of life, only the wind howling through the trees. She walked slowly toward the front door, her feet crunching on the gravel path. As she reached for the brass knocker, the door creaked open before her hand could touch it. Inside, the house was dark, shrouded in a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. The walls were lined with portraits of her ancestors, grim-faced men and women, their eyes following her every move. The floors were covered in dust, the furniture shrouded in moth-eaten sheets. Yet there was an undeniable presence in the air, something lingering in the dark corners, watching her. "Valerie!" A soft whisper echoed from the shadows, like the rustling of dry leaves. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice shaking. No answer. The whispering faded, but the sensation of being watched grew stronger. Valerie turned and saw the faint outline of a figure standing in the doorway of a grand hall at the end of the corridor. A tall silhouette, barely visible, but there. Her pulse quickened as she approached, the air growing colder with each step. As she neared the figure, it melted into the shadows. She was alone again. As the evening stretched on, Valerie made her way through the manor, exploring the rooms she hadn't stepped foot in for years. She eventually found herself standing in front of a large, ornate mirror, one that had been in the hallway since her childhood. It was framed in tarnished gold, and its surface was cracked in several places. For a moment, she simply stared at her reflection, lost in thought. But then something strange happened. Her reflection began to distort. The edges of her image seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by an unseen force. Suddenly, her own face in the mirror twisted into a grotesque smile, an expression she did not make. The eyes of her reflection darkened, and for a split second, Valerie could see a shadowy figure standing behind her. It wasn't her own reflection. It was something else, something old, something malicious. The figure whispered in a voice so cold it seemed to freeze the very air around her. "You shouldn't have come back, Valerie." The days that followed were filled with strange occurrences. The whispers in the walls grew louder, the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Valerie searched through old diaries and letters, desperate to uncover the secrets of Blackthorn Manor. But nothing could explain what was happening. The only thing she could find was a mention of a curse, one that had been passed down through generations of her family. As the nights grew longer, Valerie became more and more paranoid. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight, and then she found it. The final clue hidden beneath the floorboards in her father's study. It was a letter written by her late mother. In it, her mother described a pact her ancestors had made with a dark entity, a creature of shadows and whispers that had been sealed away in the manor for centuries. But the seal was weakening, and with it, the creature was growing stronger. "Valerie must," the letter read, "if you read this, it is already too late. The pact has been broken. The creature is awake, and it is coming for you." With no other choice, Valerie descended into the depths of Blackthorn Manor, to the place where the pact had been made, the old cellar beneath the house. The air was thick with a musty, suffocating smell, and the shadows seemed to grow longer the further she went. At the bottom of the stairs, Valerie found an ancient altar, its surface covered in symbols she could barely make out in the dim light. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse as if alive. And there, standing at the altar, was the creature, a figure cloaked in darkness, its form shifting and undulating. "You shouldn't have come back," it hissed, its voice like the scraping of nails on stone. Valerie, trembling but resolute, reached for the old tome her mother had left behind. The pages flickered in the windless air, and as she read the incantation aloud, the creature howled, its form dissolving into smoke and shadows. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the house seemed to groan as if it were dying. The moment the creature was banished, the manor began to collapse. The walls cracked, the ceiling caved in, and the floors buckled beneath Valerie's feet. She ran, her heart pounding, as the house seemed to collapse in on itself. She barely made it out of the manor before it crumbled to the ground, engulfed in flames. Valerie stood there watching the destruction, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The curse was finally broken, but at what cost? As the smoke cleared, Valerie felt the weight of the years of darkness that had haunted her family. And though Blackthorn Manor was gone, the shadows would always be with her, lurking just beyond the light. You're still here, or has fear already taken you away? If you haven't yet, leave a like and subscribe. Your support breathes life into the darkest stories. I hope we'll meet again soon. Next time, even darker and more terrifying secrets await you. Come back soon while I prepare new nightmares that will haunt your sleep.